As the 7-star Blastoise Tera Raid winds down, it's time to revisit the 7-star Tera Raid that started it all. It's one of the most polarizing Pokemon, 7-star Charizard. Welcome back to another DanSquared video, you Danimals. I had a Tera blast with the 7-star Blastoise Tera Raids, and now I'm excited to take a trip down memory lane and revisit our first ever Tera Raid. Whether you think Charizard is overrated or you love it, Dragon Tera 7-star Charizard is back. Before we get into the preview for this raid, I wanted to share my personal history with the Charizard Tera Raids because it's one of the reasons that I'm talking to you here today. I put timestamps in this video, so if you don't care about the story, you can skip ahead. But during December 2022, when the 7-star Charizard Tera Raid first aired, I had not started making content yet. I didn't even want to do the Charizard Tera Raids. I only did them because I borrowed a Pokemon from my friend Matt. Matt had done this raid, and then he came to me and my friend Pat and said, "Hey, Dan, Pat, you gotta do this Charizard raid. It's really fun." But me, I said, "Oh, I'm too busy." I couldn't be bothered to make one Tera Raid build. Now, I know that sounds shocking because now I eat, breathe, sleep Pokemon and Tera Raids, but back then I just didn't get it. So I borrowed his support Umbreon, and we hopped into a raid, the three of us, me, Matt, and Pat. And we did our first raid. And it clicked. I loved it. I loved it. I loved the strategy, the rewards. It was so satisfying, the teamwork. We played all night. We did any single raid that we could do. So then fast forward 2 months later into February 2023, and I'm loving Tera Raids. I want to make as many builds as possible, but it costs a lot of money. So I'm trying to find a way to farm the Academy Ace tournament using just one move with the turbo controller. And that's when I finally got a build working with Sylveon Money Mike. Once I got it working, I figured, hey, if I struggled this much to get it working, other people might need some help too. So I ordered a capture card, and the rest is history. Fast forward 13 months, and here we are. So whether it's your first time taking on the Charizard Tera Raids, or you're revisiting like me, I hope you enjoy this Tera Raid as much as I'm going to. But before we can talk about what builds we're going to use to take down Charizard, we have to talk more about Charizard itself. First and foremost, I want to clear up some confusion around the 7-star Charizard Tera Raids. A lot of people have been asking me whether or not I think that Charizard is going to be exactly the same, or is it going to be different this time around. What we know for sure is that Charizard is going to have the same exact stats and moves. Pokemon told us this when they announced it, when they wrote, "The Charizard appearing in this event series will have the same stats and moves as the Mighty Charizard that appeared in the previous Mighty Charizard event." This does leave the door open for Charizard's scripted actions and rewards to be different, but I would expect Charizard to be the exact same. Charizard is Tera-type Dragon. Dragon-type has 3 weaknesses: Dragon, Ice, and Fairy. Charizard has a base defense of 78 and a base special defense of 85, so we prefer to attack it with physical attackers if we can, but it doesn't make too much of a difference for us. Charizard has coverage for Dragon-type Pokemon with Dragon Pulse and Dragon Tera Tera Blast. It has coverage for Ice-type Pokemon with Inferno, Fire Blast, and Focus Blast. But Charizard has a big gaping weakness, and that is Fairy-type Pokemon. If Charizard keeps the same exact scripted actions, it's going to be one of the relatively easier 7-star Tera Raids that we've seen lately. This is because the only time it clears its debuffs is after using Overheat on turn 0. After that, we can spend the entire Tera Raid debuffing it, and there's nothing it can do about it. We can use 3 Fake Tears early, and there's nothing it can do about it. It's going to spend the entire raid at -6 special defense. If it doesn't change at all, Charizard is going to feel so much easier now than when it first ran, because us players just know so much more about Tera Raids. When you think about it, not every player was even done with the storyline or even had level 100 Pokemon then. I personally didn't. Like I said, I had to borrow an Umbreon, but by now, we know Tera Raids inside and out, and we have really optimized our Pokemon to their fullest capabilities. Now that we know what we're up against, let's take a look at my 5 builds that you can use to take down Charizard in group and solo raids. Here's a high-level look at 5 builds that you can use to beat 7-star Charizard in group raids, and maybe even solo raids if the scripted actions don't change. Either way, check back with the channel after the Charizard raids start, because I'm going to be live on night 1 finding the most consistent and accessible solo builds, and I'm going to pin those builds in the top comments of this video. So if you're watching it after the Charizard raids already launched, go check out that top comment. But right now, we got 3 builds that should look really familiar to you if you did the Charizard raids the first time around. We got Pixelate Sylveon for the attacking role in group raids and solos. We got Azumarill for the attacking role in solos. And then we got Daschbun for support. Next to Daschbun, we have our first newcomer Primarina for the attacking role in group raids and for soloing. And then on bottom, we have our support Alcremie. I chose all fairy type counters because not only do fairy type Pokemon hit dragon type Pokemon for super effective damage, but they are also immune to Charizard's dragon type attacks, and they resist Charizard's fighting type attacks. Primarina, Azumarill, and Daschbun take it a step further by being either resistant or immune to Charizard's fire type attacks. Let's take a closer look at each one of these builds. Let's kick off this list with one of my favorite Pokemon, Sylveon. It has a Fairy Tera type like all of the builds on this list, and it's using the held item Covert Cloak. Why? Because Charizard uses a couple moves that have secondary effects, like Fire Blast causes a burn, Focus Blast lowers our special defense, and Hurricane confuses us. If we use the Covert Cloak, we don't have to worry about it. Plus we have our recovery covered by one of our moves, as we'll see shortly. This build has max special attack EVs, max special defense EVs, and the final 4 in HP. It's a special attacking build, so it has a modest nature to further increase its special attack while lowering its attack. This build has max IVs in all of its stats except for attack. The ability Pixelate is one of the keys to this build. This turns Sylveon's normal type attacks into fairy type attacks, and gives them a bonus stab of plus 70% instead of the normal plus 50%. This gives Hyper Voice a base power of 153. Draining Kiss is this build's secondary attacking move. 75% of the damage dealt with Draining Kiss is restored to the user as HP. Fake Tears softens up Charizard for Hyper Voice and Draining Kiss. Misty Terrain protects Sylveon and all of its allies on the ground from status conditions for 5 turns. During these 5 turns, it also halves Charizard's Dragon type damage output for any of our allies that are not Fairy type. Up next is another returning build that looks to finally have its time shining against Charizard. It's Tera Fairy Azumarill for solos and group raids. This build uses the Shell Bell held item for some recovery. It has max attack EVs, max HP EVs, and the final 4 in special defense. It's a physical attacking build, so it has an adamant nature to increase its attack while lowering its special attack. It has max IVs in all of its stats except for special attack. The ability Huge Power is the key to this build. This takes Azumarill's pedestrian base attack of 216 and doubles it to 426, allowing us to hit for some massive damage. Azumarill is looking for some redemption against Charizard because during the first Charizard raid, there was a bug with Play Rough that caused all of the damage to be healed immediately after it was dealt. It's going to hit like a ton of bricks, especially after we use Belly Drum to drop half of our HP to make our attack go up to plus 6. We use Mud Slap to charge our Terra Orb and lower Charizard's accuracy. And last but not least, once again, we have Misty Terrain. Let's keep it rolling with the first support build of the list. It is my Tera Fairy Daschbun build that also uses the Covert Cloak held item to protect it from status conditions. It has max HP EVs, max special defense EVs, and the final 4 in attack. It has max IVs in all of its stats. It has a careful nature to lower its special attack while lowering its special defense to make sure we can really tank hits from Charizard. The ability Well-Baked Body is one of the keys to this build. This makes Daschbun not only immune to Charizard's Dragon type attacks, but also its Fire type attacks. We use Snarl to get Charizard's special attack down to -6 as soon as possible. Once again, Charizard only clears its debuffs after the turn 0 overheat. After that, we can freely debuff its special attack and make sure that all of our allies have no problem surviving. Misty Terrain allows Daschbun to protect its allies that don't have a Covert Cloak from status conditions. Howl powers up the attack and defense of Daschbun and its allies. After a couple howls, Daschbun can sneakily do a lot of damage still with Play Rough, even without any attack EVs. Up next is the first of our 2 builds featuring Pokemon that were not in Scarlet and Violet during the first Charizard raids. It is our Tera Fairy Primarina build for taking down Charizard. A special shout out to the Danimal Michael M in the DanSquared Discord for inspiring this build. Thank you, Mike. This build uses the Covert Cloak held item to once again prevent any status conditions from Charizard. This build has max special attack EVs, max special defense EVs, and the final 4 in HP. It has max IVs in all of its stats except for attack. It has a modest nature to further increase its special attack while lowering its attack because it's a special attacking build. Its abilities are not important for this raid because neither of them help us out against Charizard. Moonblast is this build's main attacking move. It hits like a ton of bricks, and it has a chance to lower the target's special attack by 1 stage. Just like Sylveon, we're packing 2 special attacking moves here. We have Draining Kiss to recover 75% of the damage that we deal back as HP. Coal Mine powers up both Moonblast and Draining Kiss while giving us some additional special bulk to help us tank hits from Charizard. Life Dew provides some additional recovery, and mostly it allows us to keep our allies alive if they are packing the Covert Cloak and don't have a way to heal themselves. Last but surely not least, it is the second support build on this list. Tera Fairy Alcremie. This build also uses the covert cloak held item to prevent any shenanigans of status conditions caused by Charizard. This build has max HP EVs, max special defense EVs, and the final 4 in special attack. It has max IVs in all of its stats except for attack, and it has a calm nature to lower its attack while raising its special defense, giving it extra bulk to help it tank hits from Charizard. Alcremie's ability isn't too important because neither of its abilities help us in this raid. Decorate, however, does help us in this raid, and it's the key to this build. Decorate is Alcremie's signature attack. It sharply raises the attack and special attack of the target. This allows it to really power up its allies and power them up fast. Before we power up our allies, we can debuff Charizard's special defense by 2 stages with fake tears. I think that in this raid we should prioritize debuffing Charizard first, because if it keeps the same scripted actions from the first time it ran, it only clears its debuffs after the turn 0 overheat, but it will clear our stat changes at 70% of the timer left. So we can fake tears 3 times early and we never have to worry about it, whereas if we decorate on turns 1, 2, and 3, we're gonna have to decorate again. So I would say go with the debuffs first. Once again, Draining Kiss provides some recovery for this build. Misty Terrain allows us to protect our allies that don't have the covert cloak held item from status conditions for 5 turns. Let me know in the comments what you are building to take down 7-star Charizard. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like, leaving a comment, or using Decorate on that subscribe button for more DanSquared. Thanks for watching and happy Charizard season!